all for being part of a rescue dog's journey, or even thinking about fostering or adopting a rescue dog. This conversation today is something that I believe is very important for anyone that has or is thinking about fostering or bringing a rescue dog into their home. So often people experience, when they bring a dog into their home, it can feel a little confusing sometimes at how the dog responds. It can feel overwhelming. And at times it can even feel a little discouraging. Now, when Wild Heart Haven launched, we kind of put a survey out to our most recent supporters and asked what the hardest part is about bringing a rescue dog into your home. And what we got were responses that were highly emotional and truly deep-rooted in concern for failing the dog. And that's why I really want to dig in today at these top 8 responses to that survey. What I hope we can do is help you understand that what you're seeing is not a bad dog. It's often a dog that has learned simply to survive, and with the right understanding, the right patience, and the right structure, behaviors can begin to change. So before we dig in, I want to introduce the women joining me in this conversation and share why I felt it was important to bring these particular voices together. When my husband Kevin and I launched Wild Heart Haven, we realized that what we see on the surface with dogs is really just a small part of what's truly going on. There's behavior, yes, but underneath there's actually a science, there's experience, and there's deep emotional and nervous system responses that we don't always understand right away. So what I wanted to do is create a space where we could look at that from all the sides. Now, joining me today, Dr. Taylor and Anna bring experience in animal behavior research and are really going to help us understand what's going on in the dog's brain, their body. And Sarah brings a powerful perspective from her work with children and families in high stress environments, truly helping us connect the emotional and human side of things. And so together, I hope that this conversation gives you a fuller understanding of what you and your dog may be experiencing so that you can support them with confidence. Taylor, I'd love to start with you. Can you share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so my doctoral research, I'm like stumbling over my words now, of course, focuses on animal cognition. So I studied primarily social behavior and stress in animals. And kind of my main goal was to broaden our understanding of non-human animals and their cognitive abilities so we can really see how we are so similar to them, and there's not necessarily any abilities that we have that they don't have. It might be on a different level a little bit. But yeah, my focus was to kind of investigate whether non-human animals have empathy. And yeah.
Anna, tell us a little about you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Anna, and I have my master's in psychology with a specialization in behavioral neuroscience, where I studied and researched animal behavior and specifically how levels of stress and those individual differences impact addiction in animals, in animal models. And addition to that research, I also do have direct experience with families and children experiencing trauma as well.
Beautiful segue. And then Sarah, please share with us your background.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sarah. While I love animals, I spent most of my career working with children and families, as Anna mentioned herself. I worked in the behavioral mental health field for supporting children and families who specifically had experienced significant trauma. So my background is more in direct care when it comes to treating children and families and just understanding how to affect change in their lives being affected by trauma.
Yes. So I'm really excited for this dialogue. And for those of you watching, this is evolving into a guidebook for those wanting to bring rescue animal, honestly. Like, yes, it's targeted, and the language is sometimes about dogs specifically, but this is very common. I know, Anna, you've brought rescue cats into your home. Dr. Taylor, you've brought rescue bunnies into your home, right? So there's every animal, every living being goes through this journey. And I'm Kristen. I'm the co-founder of Wild Heart Haven, and this work really comes from a deep love for all animals and dogs, and a desire to be part of changing the cycle that so many of them are caught in. Our mission is centered around creating a safe place and real solutions for dogs and animals that have been overlooked, misunderstood, and have been living in constant stress. And what we've learned along the way is that rescue does not end when a dog leaves the shelter. The work really begins at home, their sanctuary, their haven. And that's why conversations like this matter so much, because the more we understand, the more we can show up for them. So ladies, shall we begin? One of the first major perspectives that people shared in concern with bringing rescue dogs into their home is when living with a being that has existed in a prolonged state of fear or survival, what happens neurologically and emotionally over time? For example, we heard words about hypervigilance, shutdown, impulsivity, reactivity, loss of trust, things like that. Taylor, why don't I have you kick us off with this one?
Yeah, so there's kind of multiple levels that you can think about this, just in terms of like learning and behavior. It takes a long time to kind of unlearn some of these things. It is really like salient if you have these things going on, such as, traumatic experiences. This could even just be things like constant loud noises if they're living in a shelter, which it's like, that's not necessarily anyone's fault. Like, they're obviously trying to help the animals, but if they're constantly having loud noises or maybe not getting enough exercise, it takes a while to kind of unlearn some of these things. There's also things happening kind of on a physiological level where we have, we'll try not to get too technical here, but just being in a prolonged state of stress is not good for the body. So if you're in that prolonged like fight or flight response, we do see long lasting effects of that elevated cortisol. It can cause problems with even like cardiovascular and immune systems. It also does impact like behavior. So it's important to kind of consider what's happening under the surface of your animal.
Anna, you want to?
Yeah, touching a little bit on what Taylor said with the fight or flight mode, with the long state of survival for animals or humans, when the body enters this fight or flight and the cortisol stress hormone is firing almost constantly, so they're going to be a little bit more sensitive and reactive because when you're in that fight or flight state of mind, there's just a lot of hypervigilance, which is what you also touched about. But every moment can feel life-threatening in a way, because even if someone else may view as a safe situation, it's still a new situation for this dog or this person who has experienced some trauma. So this level of having to constantly protect themselves and have themselves in this state of constantly being fully aware of their surroundings, it can just be so exhausting for the body and the brain. And that can lead to those behaviors that you can see, the shutting down or impulsivity of a sudden movement or sudden reaction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sarah?
I 100% agree with all of that. In my experience, we saw the same things in people, little people, all people. It is, yes, living in that constant fight, flight, or freeze mode. You're just always living as if there's a constant threat. The trauma really impacts, to Taylor's point, without getting too technical, it really impacts the brain. The brain rearranges pathways due to trauma. And so the way you are responding to things is just very different because of the trauma you've experienced. And then that chronic traumatic stress, as mentioned, you're going to that part of your brain that's just very automatic, that survival center of your brain. So it is affecting your breathing, your heart rate, your sleep. You often see anxiety, panic, irritability, shaking, things like that. And that's very common as a response to living in that prolonged state of stress and trauma.
Oh my goodness. So really what we're seeing isn't just random behavior. It's the body that really has adapted and changed just to survive. My goodness. Well, thank you, ladies, for sharing on that. So going into our next point here, how does the absence of safety, predictability, and routine affect the brain's ability to regulate emotions and behavior? Anna, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, carrying over some of the ideas we talked about in the first question, when that stress hormone is constantly being activated in the brain, the specific area in the brain is the amygdala, which is what is responsible for our fear responses, our stress responses. So when this is constantly in overdrive and we're focusing, or the brain or the dog is focusing on survival instincts only, emotional regulation just is not the priority. It's not one of the top needs at the time because they're already feeling all this stress. So they need to focus on getting food, shelter, those other factors of feeling safe before the ability to regulate emotions comes in. So while it is important to have that goal of emotion regulation, it is important to have those other safe factors there first, those what the body and the brain learns to prioritize when it's in that fight or flight mode, as we discussed.
Taylor.
Yeah, so I completely agree with that, of course. I also think it's like important to recognize that like some of the learning that's going on when the dogs are having kind of that unpredictable schedule, it's kind of like a partial reinforcement schedule, which is really hard to kind of eliminate. So what that means is you're only kind of reinforcing a particular behavior sometimes. So in that case, an animal might learn, okay, if I keep trying this behavior, then maybe I'll finally get a reward, which in a household or place that is maybe not a safe space could be something like, oh, maybe if I keep begging or keep circling or some of these behaviors that are kind of more undesirable, they're learning, oh, maybe if I keep doing this, maybe I'll get food, or if I keep doing this, I'll get attention. So those like that might come out as behaviors that are not something we would consider desirable.
Right. Sarah.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say those elements of safety, predictability, routine, it means we know what to expect too. And when we can rely on something and we know what's coming and we know what to expect, we don't need to exist in that. We can start to shift kind of out of that survival part of our brain to really be in the moment, instead of thinking about what's coming next, what is the threat, what might I possibly face. So creating that sense of safety and predictability, really, I think it allows the brain and the body, humans or dogs, to really find a sense of comfort, of peace and calm, that kind of allows you to be present in the moment rather than just existing in survival, because you aren't thinking about what's coming next. You know what's coming next, and that kind of boundary, that expectation feels really safe and comfortable.
Wow. That really helps explain why routine really becomes such a powerful tool in the home, not only for animals, but I'm sure Sarah and Anna, you could especially agree in children as well, right? The bedtime, meal times, structured, an organization. Okay.
Absolutely.
So then why do trauma responses often remain after the environment has become safe? Like, I guess to clarify, like, why doesn't the body immediately immediately believe that safety has arrived? Sarah, do you want to start us with this one?
Yeah. So, we mentioned trauma has such a neurological impact on our brains and our bodies. And so that brain is a central part of are functioning, and fixing the brain is not a quick fix. So literally the pathways in your brain change due to a traumatic event, and those don't just change back overnight. Those now affect how we respond to situations. So it is that consistency of safety, predictability over time that will start to kind of change those pathways back, allow our brain to heal. I feel like a good example of this is like a car accident. It could be minor. I don't know about you all, but if I've been in a small fender bender or something, my body immediately goes into kind of that stress mode. It is shaking, nervousness, my heart is racing, I'm feeling warm, all of those things, right? We're operating in that survival mode of our brain because there is danger, even if it's something small. And then we get out of the car, we tend to the situation, we get back, hopefully we're able to keep driving depending on the situation. But then, so you're safe then moving forward, right? You're driving in your car just as you were a few minutes ago. But those physical reactions still linger. You might still feel unsafe about what's coming. You don't trust yourself. You still feel shaky. It takes a while for the body to really come down and reset. And should the situation and accident be more traumatic, I expect those to be longer lasting, more lingering kind of effects. So a situation happens, it's threatening, then the danger is no longer there, but you don't necessarily feel safe. Your body is still reacting in that moment as if something unsafe could happen. So very similarly, it takes a while to get back into that safety, routine, predictability, for your brain and body to be able to say, breath of relief. Okay, I can now function, and I'm not just operating in survival mode.
True. Wow. Anna.
Yeah, Sarah made a lot of great points, and it applies to both the human and animal's life, as we've mentioned a lot, is how even Taylor mentioned in the beginning, how it may look different, but a lot of the processes are the same in both humans and animals. And so, especially when these animals or people experience the traumatic, whether it's a traumatic event, a traumatic environment, it may be happening at the very early stages of their life. So maybe like right when they're born, right in those early experiences impact even more, because it's really just all that this individual knows. So a good way to see it is that, if similar to the fender bender example that Sarah gave, just day-to-day anxiety that someone might experience. Usually what anxiety does in the brain is you're thinking of the worst outcome is going to happen. And when an individual has experienced those traumatic events, all they know is the worst outcome. So of course that's what they're going to always be expecting. So they are the hypervigilance comes in, very wary of the surroundings and who to trust, because the trust has never been there in the past and hasn't really been able to. If it's a dog, maybe not, hasn't had a person to trust, so it doesn't even understand that relationship is something that can be formed. And along with the pathways that are constantly rewiring, it is possible to reshape those pathways. But like we've discussed, it does take a while, especially when it is coming from traumatic experience, from early life experiences.
Yeah. Wow. Taylor.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like that goes back to kind of what we were saying I think it was the first question we were talking about too, where it kind of takes time to like unlearn some of these things, because like we're saying, even like our fender bender example here, even now you're safe and whatever, moving forward, you might now be hyper vigilant. You're thinking, oh, this person now is coming close to me, and that's still something that lingers even if now we're safe. So that kind of emphasizes why routine is so important, and just kind of being patient, taking the time to help kind of unlearn to be so aware of your not even aware of your surroundings, but like hyper aware, hyper vigilant, you can kind of start to let some of those things go. And also what we were talking about, even just with the stress hormones. So being constantly in fight or flight has those long lasting results. Even if we're safe now, it kind of takes time for the safeness to kick in the body and brain. So
Right. So even when we know we're safe, even as humans, there's still learning to believe it, I guess, right? Like it takes time. Absolutely. Wow. So then can you kind of explain how survival instincts will override like learning logic and the trust in both humans and animals? Taylor, I guess kind of keep going on where we're coming off of that last one. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so when we're kind of facing danger, your body naturally kind of kicks into this, we keep calling it fight or flight. But it really is, we have this like stress response that just automatically kind of takes over. And that's to keep us safe, but it also can, like we're talking about, cause problems. So if people are kind of hyper aware of things, we might be kind of going into this fight or flight mode over, I don't know, being at the grocery store, things like that. So now things that aren't normally scary are more scary because your body has been telling you, oh, everything is scary. So I feel like that's just something to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah. Anna.
Yeah, basically with the nervous system is constantly on overdrive, and similar to what I said earlier, because of that hyper awareness of the environment and constantly having to think of, am I safe? Is this an okay place to be? Do I have to watch for myself? Do I have to look behind my back? You know, that type of feeling that both dogs and humans can experience. When it comes to the learning aspect, it's too difficult for the brain to slow down enough to start learning the behaviors that we might want when they come into the foster home or when we adopt the dogs or animal, because they're not in a mindset that they feel that they can, if they can't regulate their emotions and how they're feeling and their body and reactions, then it's not even worth trying to learning sometimes, because they just need to start at that step one of knowing they're safe, and then they can start learning the behaviors that are associated with being safe.
Sarah.
That actually really makes me think of, in my studies in human development, we learned a lot about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't know if that's familiar to anyone, but it is essentially the layers of what you need first in order to then build upon that and get to this almost peak of like self-actualization. So at the very baseline of what you need are those psychological needs. So there's those very basic needs before you can even begin to feel okay. The next step is safety and security. So in my experience, those basic needs are things like shelter, food, water, the things that keep you going physically, physiologically. And then you can begin to move into that state of, what are the things I need to feel safe and secure? So now that I'm surviving and I'm alive, what makes me feel safe and secure, before you can even get to a place of this understanding of feeling love and belonging and all of those things that come after that. So I believe that to be true about probably most beings, is that we have to have those basic needs met before. I think it was mentioned that it is just too hard for our brain to be able to get to that thinking part and feeling, if those needs aren't met and if we aren't feeling safe. And that is true for both humans and animals. And I think that is really important to think about when we're thinking if a animal is getting its basic needs met consistently, and then are they feeling safe and secure consistently, and then can they begin to receive and show that sense of like love and belonging and feeling there.
Wow. So what you three have just shared really shifts even how I'm thinking about training in those early days, right? Like you bring a dog home and you want to like start, sit, stay, and all these things. And they're just like, am I going to live for another minute? So wow, powerful.
It's almost like kind of these stress pathways are overriding everything else until we can kind of calm down. We get the routine. Okay, we're safe. Yeah.
And it really doesn't, there is no set time frame, right? Like we hear a lot about the 90-day pathway, when you bring a rescue into your home, but for some dogs it could take 6 months, it could take even a year, right? As I'm sure Anna and Sarah, you've seen in human situations as well, right? So okay.
Yeah, I think Anna shared, the earlier those things happen too, it's all that being knows. And same in human development, I think we hear that a lot, the first like 0 to 6 years of life is so important in brain development, in learning. And so depending on when you bring that dog into your home, if it was day one or in the womb or like just right out they were experiencing this traumatic environment, that in my experience could take much longer to overcome because it is so learned and so embedded, that could definitely take a lot longer than a dog who didn't have that same early experience.
So this kind of pulls me right into, I think, the biggest statement that I read in this survey is the unknown of how the dog is going to behave. So my question specifically is, what are the most common behavioral expressions of long-term stress, unresolved trauma? What would those be like? Taylor, why don't you start us?
So I think it probably depends a little bit what kind of trauma the animal has experienced. So
Sure.
An animal that maybe has been abused could be different than an animal that was abandoned, let's say. Like those are two kind of different experiences. So I think it's important to think about how that might change like behaviors that would arise. But I think a common one could even be like aggression. And it's not necessarily that this is like a bad animal, but they're just learning to protect themselves. So that I think is one that scares people, of course, but it's important to think kind of why that might be happening. Another one we had said hypervigilance. That could come again from even like abandonment. Let's see. It could be things like suddenly seeming fearful of a particular type of, let's say it could be an animal, it could be a certain type of person. I know some of my friends' dogs specifically don't like men or don't like when men wear hats, things like that. So it's likely those things came from whatever they had experienced before, we know what happens with them at the shelter. But
Right. Anna.
Yeah, it's important to remember that these behaviors that the dog or animal is showing us when we bring them into a foster or adoptive home or even a shelter is that it is what their brain has taught them to do to make them safe. So I thought of a common example that I've seen in a rescue dog that I've had, as well as even a more recent rescue cat that I have, is resource guarding. So what this is, I'm sure if you've fostered a dog, you might be familiar with it, but whether it comes to toys or food, they are very aggressive if anyone comes near them when they're eating or playing with their toy, because this might be learned from the shelter where multiple animals were going for the food, so they had to go fast, or this could be from before that where the animal is learning that sorry, brain sorry, brain fart. Let me restart that sentence. So, like I said, yes. So it could come from the shelter when they are going for the food at the same time as somebody else, but also from before the shelter when they were if they were outside or in a home that was neglectful, they didn't know when the next meal was going to be. And so if it's comes to food, they're eating all the food as fast as possible. They're making sure that they are the only ones that have it. And yeah, I just think this is a really good example of something that happens because of, and it's something that's definitely a difficult behavior for them to unlearn, but it's what we talked about with that routine and predictability that comes into play, where once, even if it takes up to a year of realizing there is going to be food every single day, then those behaviors will hopefully become more resolved and easier to work on.
I would agree with all of these behaviors. I similarly saw these in youth that I worked with who were facing trauma and just had significant amounts of stress. Food was such an underlying factor for them as well. I think that goes back to that hierarchy of needs and what we need to survive and exist. And food is such a big part of that. So that kind of resource guarding, that manipulation and resource seeking out. I would never see that as a bad thing in humans nor as dogs. Kristen, I think you said early, we're not talking about bad dogs, but it is the behavior that's showing up, the unwanted behavior that we're trying to address. And it is just based on what their experience was, and it is just shaping who they are and how their behaviors are coming out as. So while my experience is more with youth, I would agree that aggression, that kind of withdrawal, hyperactivity, even that disassociation, we see that too. It's different for every being. I think it does depend on the trauma, it does depend on the situation, and then it just depends on the being too. Everyone feels things differently, and so it could show up in lots of different ways, but those are very common behaviors you would see in any being that's been impacted by trauma in such a significant way.
So what people are seeing at home when they bring a rescue animal in is just simply that being trying to manage something more internally, right? And it's just, like you said, behaviors are communication. So then how does unpredictability, like inconsistent feeding times, maybe even forcing touch and affection, or reducing movement, exercise, and things like that, reinforce these fear-based behavior patterns? Anna?
Yeah, something that's really important that we have touched on about the humans and animals, all animals alike, are very routine-based animals. The brains work best on routine and consistency. So when in early life, these traumatic experiences that we were talking about bring a lot of inconsistency. So like I was mentioning, the not knowing when the next meal will be, or not knowing if they will be able to go run around maybe, or when somebody touches them, they don't know if it might be more of an abuse situation, if that's what the trauma the dog or animal experienced. So when you bring a animal into this new environment, this new home, it's important that it becomes more predictable, because if they continue living in this unpredictable state, even if it's not, it's not going to be the same traumatic experience that they were in before, but because any sort of unpredictability to this animal means they're not safe. So when it comes to the routine of the consistent feeding times, consistent play times, being careful when you go to touch an animal that might want to pull away, and it's having to know what those body language and those signs are in the animal, whether it is you can see the whites of the eyes, they're cowering a bit. It's important to really stay consistent in order to make sure those behaviors are not happening, because if they keep indicating that they are afraid, then it's clear that the animal or even humans will need more stability to be able to get to that place where we talked about, with even just the learning, the better behaviors, the more positive behaviors.
Yeah. Taylor?
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going to go with it. It goes back to kind of what we were talking about, unlearning. like not bad behaviors, but undesirable behaviors, kind of building that routine helps to put in place more desirable behaviors. So if you really keep a strong routine going, and when you see these more desirable behaviors happening and you reinforce that with some type of reward, whether it be like a treat or even just petting them, anything like that, then we can start to kind of build this more desirable state, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sarah?
Yeah, I would reinforce that. Just that what we've spoken about, inconsistency, unpredictability triggers that kind of threat. No matter what it is, it's inconsistent, and so that automatically makes the being feel unsafe and unsure. So it is that consistency and predictability that breeds safety, and then we can get to that part of our brain that reacts in thoughtful ways. So with the lack of that, that just takes us back to that survival mode, those basic functions, and we sense threat, unsafety, all of those things.
Mm-hmm. So that just really reinforces how important even the small daily patterns are. And I've even seen that with one of our more recent rescues. It's actually taken almost 6 months for us to really get her to calm down and just really coexist in a less hyper aware, hyper vigilant, almost a little resource guarding tendencies, right? And just really feel like she's part of a family now. She's part of this pack, and she's going to get her food. She's going to get her place, to rest and play. But we've had to stay very diligent to consistent patterns for her. So then what actually helps trauma and stress begin to heal? I know we've talked a lot about routine and things like that. So why is calm, specifically repetitive routine, really truly that powerful to regulate fear and anxiety? Taylor?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about with just routine and starting to kind of learn these more desirable behaviors and really start to kind of unlearn the undesirable behaviors. I feel like just having calm routine, and you're going to get your food, and and if you behave in this way, you get your treat or your reward, and you just kind of start to learn over time that, okay, this is not where I was before. This is safe. And it does take time. It takes time to kind of rewire those pathways.
Anna?
Like Sarah was mentioning earlier, this question actually made me think of the importance of the hierarchy of needs, right? Where it is important to start with the biological needs, the food, the shelter, the being able to sleep in a safe spot and everything before that trust will build up. Because if the body is not eating, not sleeping, if it's not taking care of itself, then trust is just kind of off the table for a bit. So we've discussed how it's really different for each animal, because depending on what the traumatic background is and how early in life the experience was, every animal will come into a home with different needs and at different levels of the hierarchy of needs. Maybe it learned in the shelter that food is going to be available, so you don't need to work on that part, but you'll need to work on the other safety components. But altogether, something that's really important with being the calm and repetitive routines and practices is just bringing patience into it, patience for the animal, because for the most part, we usually do not know exactly what the animal has been through, and it's important to just keep that in mind while having all these calm, repetitive behaviors, because that is what makes them feel the most safe.
Yeah. Sarah?
Yeah, I would think almost opposite of this too. So thinking about why calm, repetitive routine would be so important, I would think, think about if it wasn't like that. So when we as humans engage in a situation, if you're going to meet something where it's at, in that highly aggressive, traumatic, stressful state, it's not going to bring the situation down. It is only going to escalate the situation. So in working with children impacted by trauma, de-escalation was a big part of our work. Obviously, you'd want to prevent the behavior, the unwanted behavior from happening. But if you get to a point where it is unsafe, aggressive, fighting, all of those things, we would never do that back to another person, a child, an animal, right? We would approach it with a calm mindset, a calm demeanor, get on that level, use calm speech, be inviting with our body language. We would want to bring that other being back down and help, right? Because their brain is not able to do that. It's too hard to be surviving and thinking rationally. So we are going to meet them with that calmness to be able to de-escalate, come down, and be able to then work through whatever it is that situation was. Obviously, if there's situations of imminent harm, and we do that with children, right? If you're going to run into the street and we need to stop you, we're going to react strongly, and it might feel aggressive, but it is strong, quick reaction to prevent some kind of harm. But ultimately, we are meeting a situation with what we want it to be, and we have the power to create what that situation is. So for a dog coming into an environment, if that dog is escalating, aggressive, showing those unwanted behaviors, I think that kind of like energy, not matching, but trying to bring them down, asking them to really match your energy and creating that calm of that environment will help de-escalate that and bring that down to what you're wanting.
Right. And I've seen this move milestones or move mountains, if you will, faster. When we would have guests come into our home, hey, when you walk in, will you just come in very calm? Maybe even ignore the dogs. I'm going to pause even on giving you a hug yet. And I'm even talking kind of how I'm talking to them as they walk into the house, right? We're just going to exude calmness until the dogs calm down. And then we're going to acknowledge the dog, or wanting to take them on a walk, right? And they are just, maybe one of them is out of control with excitement, right? And again, I'm projecting that it's excitement, but it also could be fear and panic. Like, oh, is she going to go take me somewhere and abandon me? Or do I now have to find my food, right? We don't know what that energy intensity is truly. So when I just stand calm, breathe deep, and wait for, the dog to just calm and sit before we begin our walk, teaching them that, okay, we're not going to move forward on something fun and enjoyable until we're in sync and we're calm. So it's truly, it seems like a huge part of the environment really is us, right? It's how we show up, how we feel, and how our energy kind of brings them into a safe space. So
yeah, and I think what you're saying too is exactly what we were talking about before, about starting to kind of reinforce these more desirable behaviors. So instead of running around, rampant around your kitchen or wherever you're about to take them outside, you wait until they calm down, they sit, and now you're reinforcing that behavior. So now they learn, okay, if I want to go on a walk, then I have to sit, so I have to calm down. And over time, they really start to learn.
They'll learn that. Yes, absolutely. And, Sarah, you brought up the point. Yes. When I had kids, right? And when one of them would run too fast down the driveway, too close to the street, what do we as moms naturally do? We yell their name, or we yell stop, right? And I've watched a mother dog with her puppies, and, if she doesn't like something one of her puppies are doing, she'll give a quick little snarl or snap, but then she immediately goes back to calm, and then she maybe licks them or continues to care for them and things like that. And I think it's, I guess this really pulls into, the last thing is how important really is the energy and the emotional state of a nervous system of the caregiver, us, right? How important is it for us in the influence of healing, any traumatized individual? Sarah.
I think that we've all either seen or had experiences where we've had dogs, maybe other animals, sense our feeling and energy. right? There's something different about either our state of being, something sad happened, something happy happened, something is weird in the home. My humans are getting ready to leave the house or go on a trip and something feels different. They pick up on that kind of energy. I experience that too with little ones, that you can sense and feel someone else's emotional state or energy. And I think that in and of itself describes why it's so important. It describes the power we have too. We are in control of how we react to things, and not the things that happen to us, but how we respond to those things. And so we have the ability to control our environment. And so I think that using that to create a space and safe environment for beings to just be safe, calm, express themselves, they will match us with that energy. But I think that knowing we have the ability to do that, and just knowing that, I think we're so connected. That emotional energy, that thought energy, they can feel that in us. And so what we exude, I think, is really powerful in how we are wanting them to be in that space.
Anna.
Yeah. So one of the first things I learned to use as an intervention when I worked with people with trauma was self-regulation through co-regulation. So this just emphasizes the fact that if another individual is presenting as calm, relaxed, patient, it's easier to reflect that emotion, because especially when trauma is involved, and like we were mentioning earlier, the nervous system is on overdrive when you first bring this animal into your home, right? So the animal's already naturally very sensitive to emotions, just like humans are. But when that trauma is involved, it's like an extra level because of the being hyper aware and noticing those emotions shift. So, like Sarah was mentioning, these emotions, it's very easy for the emotions to be picked up. So that's why it's important for us to have that more calm state, and go back to that. Self-regulation is co-regulation. The person or animal cannot regulate or will regulate better if someone else is regulated with them.
Taylor.
Yeah, so this actually relates directly to my research. So broadly, it was empathy in animals, but kind of the rudimentary level of that is emotional contagion. So that's just kind of an automatically acquiring another's kind of emotional state. And we know that animals do this. So there's plenty of research that shows that animals do this. There's a little bit less when it comes to like interspecies, so like a person with an animal, but because dogs and cats and anything that's really been like domesticated, they're working so closely with humans that it really is unique in the sense that it almost is more like a within species interaction, because they've learned to pick up on our cues so much. And another thing I was thinking about is I used to ride horses, and anytime someone was nervous, the horses know this right away. So I had one friend who would, she was just always super nervous, and every single time, without fail, the horses are running away with her. It could be the oldest horse in the barn. And we're all cracking up because we're like, oh my God, I can't even believe that horse can move that fast. And it's because they know that you're nervous. And again, that's an animal that's more so domesticated. So they can totally pick up on our emotions. And that's actually something I would like to kind of expand our research with, hopefully.
Yeah, I agree, because it's really not just what we do, it's how we show up, right? And one of the things that I brought a dog in, and he just destroyed everything in my house, like the couch, the pillows, the tree, like so much. And at first I would get frustrated, and I would I'm sure my neighbors would die laughing, because I would chase him around the yard while he had a Christmas ornament hanging in his mouth, and I'm yelling at him, and I'm just like, we're getting nowhere, right? And I learned so much about myself and the power of just self-control and calm. And his response changed almost overnight when I just learned to not run around like a maniac, and things like that. And just then kind of redirected and celebrated the pathway, and the response they needed to see. So this was really powerful dialogue, ladies. I loved, hearing your background and your insight on this, because it is so true. I heard what you said, and I know you guys have put it into action yourself, but for someone who hasn't taken the education path that you guys had, and the experience path in your professions, for me to see it happen even just over the past 4 years of bringing in rescue dogs and things like that. Like I said, I'm starting on my journey with this. What you're saying is gold, and it's so true and so powerful, and I want to thank you. I guess if there was one mindset shift that you hope that any foster or individual willing to adopt, or even just a caregiver, right? Maybe you've agreed to help a shelter during inclement weather, or, just, to move a dog to safety quickly until they can find a more permanent foster home or adopter. What could make supporting any traumatized being, what is the mindset shift you would ask of them to consider, and why? Sarah?
One of the most valuable lessons I learned in my studies and work was the mindset of, we will do well if we can, and if we can't, there's a reason why. And I think that really applies to animals alike as humans. We talk about no bad children, no bad dogs. Behavior, right back to that, behavior is communication. And really digging into the approach to trauma that we've heard a lot in the last few years is, it's not what's wrong with you, but it's what's happened to you. And so digging under that, we will do well if we can. A dog will do well if it can. And if it can't, there's a reason why. And trying to understand that reason why to help that dog learn and do well. And not just putting that blame and shame and bad dog mentality on that and trying to, beat the bad dog out of it. There is a reason why that those unwanted behaviors are there, and we are struggling to do well. And if we can get to the bottom of that and understand why, then we can help that begin to shape and shift.
Taylor?
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. I think that just kind of understanding why something is happening really helps to kind of open up your mind and be like more empathetic towards what's going on. And just kind of like overall patience is key, I guess, is what I was thinking about. Even when you were talking, Kristen, about your dog and chasing them around and things like that. And it was just making me think, even kind of just being patient with yourself, where you're kind of also learning how to interact with an animal that is new to you. You might have to try different things and kind of not beat yourself up if something you try doesn't work, and just kind of do your best and be calm, and things will kind of follow suit, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Anna?
Yeah, I definitely agree with those mindset shifts and takeaways. And if there's something that one mindset shift that I would recommend, it's honestly just understanding that you are not alone in this process. There is plenty of resources, for example, this and the guide that is being created. And there's plenty of communities, and like we've said, each animal is going to come with a different experience. So even if you think you've seen it all, there might be another behavior, but it doesn't mean that it can't be unlearned, and it doesn't mean it can't be replaced with a positive behavior through reinforcement.
Yeah, and I think it is really powerful, like you were saying, to kind of recognize that there are other people that have gone through similar things. So even just putting it into some sort of chat with people that have similar experiences, whether it be with fostering or just adopting dogs in general, just having like a group of people that understand those things, and again, are kind of patient with those things. And there's no stupid questions, just kind of being able to talk through situations, I think helps a lot.
Yes, absolutely. Ladies, this was like immensely powerful. And I appreciate so much you guys coming together. And just even for me, hearing some of these things again, reminding me just how important it is to understand that they are going through a journey themselves, and to be patient, not only with them, but with myself, and understanding this. And Sarah, the acceptance, not every day is going to be a great day, and that's okay, as long as we're just kind of taking that deep breath in, realizing we have people around us who do want to help and support and try to give maybe suggestions and tips, or maybe just a listening ear. And just really grateful. I'm grateful for what the Wild Heart community is building, to support dogs really globally. But if you are considering, fostering, rescuing anything, do it, and realize, just like these ladies have said, you're not alone in this. It's a powerful step to care about another being so much, and to be willing to work on yourself so that you can show up to help them work on themselves. And I just want to thank you for either the thoughts that you're having about rescuing, or to take that first step and to do it. And for those of you who are experienced rescues and foster families, thank you for what you're doing. I really see you as the front line to this challenge, to this cycle, and you are the ones making a huge difference. And encourage you to to speak up and share and participate, because for those who want to do this, yes, it's scary, yes, you don't know what you're going to get, but what I can guarantee you're going to get is self-development and an awareness of yourself, and giving just one more precious being a chance to live. So thank you.